in traditional Indian literary criticism, which is neither Buddhist nor Hindu by Jain, but which is, as it were, a common tradition, there is a term kavita, which we usually translate as poetry, but the Indian critics, the traditional critics, make it clear that kavita is neither verse nor prose. It can be expressed, or it can find expression in terms of verse, but it can equally find expression in terms of prose.
It's where it comes from.
It's where it comes from. It's the level from which it comes.
The level.
Yes.
Could you please
Yes.
speak a little about that, Sangharakshita, because you in your first essay in that book have very interesting things to say about the Indian view of different levels from which poetry comes, and you quote Sri Aurobindo, whom I also have read that book and very much agreed with what you were saying. So could you perhaps say a little about that?
Well, in all the Indian spiritual traditions, and even in Western traditions until recently, it was generally recognized that there were many different levels of consciousness accessible to the individual human being, some lower, some higher. And Aurobindo has elaborated on this in a quite interesting way. He speaks in terms of the vital and the lower mental and the higher mental and the overmind. And he speaks of this mainly, he speaks of these different levels mainly in connection with the experience of yoga. In Buddhism also we have these different levels. We have, for instance, the levels of the four jhanas, the levels of higher consciousness. There's a set of four lower, higher levels, and there's a set of four higher levels, and so on. There are other classifications too. But this is common grounds to all the great spiritual traditions, especially in the East. But Aurobindo, very interestingly, speaks of poetic inspiration, artistic inspiration, as coming from any of these, from the vital, from the lower mental, the higher mental, and he seems to believe that the higher the level, the greater the poetry. But of course, with this proviso, which I'm not sure that he actually makes, that it is poetry to begin with, because I think I know what you're thinking. That Aurobindo's theory is excellent, but his actual practice as a poet doesn't, let us say, quite come up to his own artistic standards.
He wasn't a Kavi.